Welcome back, faithful. This is the Gilded Gang Podcast. I'm your host, Will Deal. And today I want to talk about the undrafted free agents that I think have a shot, a realistic shot to make the squad now that we're wrapping up with OTAs and headed into mini camps. There's a few names that I want to share with you guys, and I want to discuss that today. All right. So here are some of the names that of these guys that I've just kind of watched and uh, did my scouting, did some of my background that I like to do, which is just I like to study players. That's well, I shouldn't say it's my background, but I wish it was. I wish it was my background, but it's something that I truly enjoy doing, and that's studying up the players. This is pre-draft, after the draft, and I just really enjoy going through the tape. I try to go through some actual game tape, not just highlights, because there's only so much you can gain from that. I mean, a lot of players look amazing in their highlights, or at least they look like players. Once upon a time, Dante Pettis had great highlights, and then you watch him play, you watch the actual game tape, and you see how all the imperfections start to come out. So for me, I try to look at some game tape. It might not be a full game, but if I can watch a few quarters here and there, I try to do that. And then I just like to kind of analyze how a guy moves and how what are his steps like? I mean, for receivers, how does a guy get out of his breaks? Brandon Ayuk is such a great route runner, and he's become such a great route runner. And he's a guy that definitely want to talk a lot about on the channel as the season goes on, especially after what Debo said this week about you can't cover that guy in a phone booth right now. And I am really excited to see that. I'm excited to be able to see the evolution in his game because I really believe the next step for him is just making catches in big moments in big spots where he's the number one guy. Whether he is or not, whether it's Kittle or Debo in that given game, he's making the number one type receiver catches. So for me, being able to see him do something like in that Seattle Seahawks game, the wild card game, that corner of the end zone ball that Brock threw him in that scramble drill, those have to be caught. Those have to be touchdowns. I think that's the next evolution for him. The route running's great, and I think the speed is enough, especially with that route running, but it's can he make the catches that need to be made and then obviously make some of the circus catches as well. But I think that's the next evolution because he's such a great yak player. I mean, he gets to his spot, he gets the ball, and he's going to get you another 10, 15, 20 yards, or he may break it all the way. So I think he did such a great job of that last year. And as we go forward, I look forward to talking more about that. For now, as far as the undrafted players that I think could make the team. There aren't really any receivers, so definitely that's a position that I think is pretty packed, especially with that pick of Ronnie Bell in the 7th round, who I think they're not really saying it, but I think that he's somewhat competing with Danny Gray. Now, apparently Danny Gray, from all reports, he looks a lot better, looks a lot more prepared, understands the playbook a lot better. Obviously, he's been in the offense another extra year, right? So all of that comes into play. And then, but apparently, I mean, I've heard some good things about Ronnie Bell as well. That he looks very polished for a rookie receiver. So just things to watch out for. So not an undrafted guy, but a 7th rounder. Because the way the roster looks right now, the 49ers are so deep at so many positions. Honestly, the one position that I think could use more depth, and they keep signing these guys. It almost seems like right off the street they sign some of these guys, these defensive ends or tackles or whatnot. And so, but that's a position where, for me, a big key is if you can get some production out of Drake Jackson. I still have really high hopes for his development, and I think that just as a pure rusher, he did remind you a lot of what Alden Smith did. Just some of the stuff that Alden did in 2011 with his rushes and how he was able to kind of get that burst off the ball. He's lengthier than you think, and he's able to get more power in on his rushes, whether it's a bull rush or a swim move, what have you. He's still learning, I think, the game in terms of when to do certain things, and he's learning that this level is different than the previous one, and the tackles are just so much more advanced, and they're able to time up the snap count differently. I mean, we had Lane Johnson who kept really was offsides most of that game probably, and I think that helped him a lot going against Bosa. But it's not just him. A lot of the tackles, they just time up so well and their steps are so good. So their positioning is much better than it is in college. And I think that Drake kind of struggled with that a little bit. And he just really didn't get much opportunities. So he's a guy that I'm looking to see if he can make that step. And again, I know I promise I'll get to the undrafted guys, but those are just a few guys that just in camp stood out to me, and just everything that we've heard, and just in general, guys that I think if they do well, if they play well, it's such a huge, huge boost to the team. So for me, again, Brandon Ayuk taking it up another notch. All reports are that he's looking amazing in camp. So if he can take it up another notch, that would be great. And then, like I said, Drake Jackson just providing that other defensive end spot opposite Bosa, and that would just be a really, really big help. And it would just, I think it would take some of the pressure off of Nick, who, I mean, as we know, he's probably still going to average 17 to 20 sacks a season. It's just he can roll out of bed and get you, 15 sacks a season, 13 sacks, force fumbles. He's just going to be wreaking havoc all over the place, especially now that Javon Hargrave is on the team. He's another guy that, again, more obviously in the interior, but still, he's just such a force that the gravity that he's going to pull with Armstead, all of that should make it a lot easier for someone like Drake Jackson to go ahead and get, I don't know, 7, 8 sacks this year. A lot of QB pressures, maybe a forced fumble or two. I mean, if he did that, then our defense is even more dangerous and more tenacious than it was last year. And it was already pretty good last year. It was really good actually, especially as the season wore on and we got into that 10-game winning streak. I thought that we had a couple games there. The Raider game obviously gave up a lot of points, but outside of that, I thought that the pass rush, for the most part, it dictated terms during many of the games down the stretch. So we'll see how that looks. And then as we transition to the main topic about these undrafted free agents, I mean, with this much depth and this much expectation, you're talking about a roster that is looking to go past the NFC Championship game for only the second time in the last 4 or 5 years, right? So it there is a lot of pressure to be able to perform. So preseason is going to be really, really interesting. Obviously, practice OTAs that will continue, 7-on-7s that will continue to be hyper focused, and I'm sure that everyone will be watching closely who's standing out. Apparently Jair Brown just stepped in with the ones and looked really good. But again, he was drafted. I know it was a third rounder, but he's a guy that really was more like a second round, early second round grade. Maybe could even go higher, late first. So great, talented player. And so the expectation there is that he will rotate in as a starter at some point, whether it's to start the season or as the season goes on. But who of these other guys, as we like to say, the undrafted free agents, and I like to call them the others, right? These other guys are fighting for a spot. Which ones of these guys actually have a shot? And I'll give you a couple of names. One guy that I really like, Oregon State fullback Jack Coletto. I believe it's Oregon State, and he's a guy that I watched some tape on him. He has a little Taysom Hill in him because he's strong and he's plenty big enough to play fullback, but he's got some of the quickness and athleticism that if you wanted to put him out at tight end and use him in a double tight end set, I think you could do that much in the way that they use Juice sometimes, and they do those wheel routes or they just do different routes with Juice that are more tight end type routes than fullback routes. I really like his game, and it's just nice to see that if for some reason you have an injury or what have you to Kyle Juszczyk, who's just been I mean, he's just a steady guy. He's just always there, steady Eddie, and he's an Iron Man really, and he's one of the few fullbacks left in the game because it's just a forgotten position, right? It's just no longer something that a lot of teams use other than the 49ers that have a run game, a zone read running game, and just more variations off of the run. And so he's one guy to look at, Jack Coletto. Like I said, he can catch the ball. He can get you first downs and short yardage. So he's an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Joey Fisher is a big dude. So Joey Fisher, the offensive lineman, that a lot of people were talking about. He's a guy that is really interesting, probably projects more on the outside as a tackle than on the interior, but he's a guy to keep an eye on. And then a couple guys, this kid out of Marshall, this really stocky guy that just is, you know what? He's kind of a stockier version, bigger version of kind of a hasty, right? And I think, and he runs with way more power. So I actually think I can compliment him a little better. He's kind of a smaller version of a Jordan Mason, right? I just really like his burst. I really like his vision, and that's a running back out of Marshall, Kalen Laybourne. So keep an eye on this kid in preseason, Kalen Laybourne. And again, it's a deep running back room, and so I don't really think that he's gonna have too much of a shot, but it's a guy that maybe you can stash on your practice squad if he doesn't make the team, and he might be a special teamer as well. So keep in mind if these guys, right, if they can't make the team in terms of their actual position grouping, there's plenty of special teams positions that are gonna need to be filled, or at least are in competition to be filled. So that's another guy I really like, Kalen Laybourne. And then this guy is just this dude is just huge. The linebacker out of I believe it's Minnesota, University of Minnesota, Mariano Sori Marin. So Mariano Sori Marin, this guy just attacks the ball. Really big dude. You wouldn't think he's as quick and explosive, but he just knows where to find the ball. Has great vision, and he's just a really big, athletic linebacker. And he's a guy that just kind of a tackling machine. So think of a much taller, uh, lengthier Chris Borland, basically, right? So just a guy who has a nose for the ball, knows knows how to dissect the plays, and just you could tell he's a guy that just studies his opponents really well and knows where to be. So I think those kinds of guys have a great shot to make the team because, when you have a roster that's this stacked, the thing that differentiates you is your study habits. The thing that differentiates you and maybe puts you on the team is how smart you are and how quickly you're picking up the plays, how quickly you're picking up everyone else's tendencies. Obviously within your position group, what can you bring to the table that maybe is a little bit different than the guy next to you? So I think this guy's really interesting, and he'll force some fumbles as well. Like he knows where to find the guy that's the ball carrier, and he just he's not necessarily a very fast guy, and there's a reason why he went undrafted, but at the same time he's plenty big enough, athletic enough, and a consistent tackler, a very good form tackler, that he's a guy that he usually pushes guys backwards. So I really like him a lot. So those are the four names that I really like. Again, fullback, Jack Coletto, offensive lineman, Joey Fisher, running back, Kalen Laybourne, and then Mariano Sori Marin, linebacker out of Minnesota. So those are some of the names to keep an eye on. And with that, I'm looking forward to continuing to provide some more content for you. Please feel free to like and subscribe if you like the content. Helps the channel as always. And thank you very much, everybody. See you next time.